Hello and welcome to Understanding Emotions. My name is Sankalp. I'm a neuroscientist at the University of Oxford, where I also did my PhD. And today we are going to talk about AI safety, something I think which should be top of mind for a lot of us, but it isn't. And before I begin, I must emphasize that this podcast or whatever I do on the internet more broadly is separate from my research role at the university. There's an argument to be made that we should all be concerned and worried about AI. And the fact that we are not. Unless you are living in a place where there's an ongoing war, or perhaps you are living in what is a peaceful country or a culture, but within that culture you are repressed. So, for example, if you are a woman in a country where education for women is not a thing, then of course these are more immediate problems for you, and those are the problems you should focus on and the community around you should focus on. But if you look at a problem, especially for the global north or in a country which is relatively peaceful and relatively wealthy, then I'm convinced that AI safety is our big problem to focus on, perhaps the biggest problem to focus on. And to start with, I want to talk about this idea that it's not very obvious why that is the case. It's not very obvious why we should be worried about an innocent chatbot. Like what harm can something on my computer really do? And unless you zoom in enough, unless you disentangle the system enough, it doesn't strike to us as a big problem. Now, contrast that to something like the atomic bomb. Now, I am going to use this, since this is a conversation about AI safety, there will be analogies and comparisons to serious things. So brace yourself for that. But think about the atomic bomb. And it's very obvious why that is a problem. So if you were Oppenheimer or the crew building that sort of a device, it's going to be very obvious for you, like what you're building is going to be a big problem. And for people who are watching this development and learning about it, for them also it's going to be a very obvious thing why this bomb is a problem. Like the whole sole purpose of the bomb is to destruct and cause mass extinction. I want to argue that AI carries a similar risk, if not bigger. But except it doesn't have that image, it doesn't have that graphic recoil that we naturally have when we see an atomic bomb explode. With AI, it almost sounds too romantic. It almost sounds, the idea of being taken over by robots, it sounds romantic, it sounds pleasurable. There's some perverse joy in thinking about that idea. It's almost like the pleasure we get from reading science fiction. Except it is a real risk. And it is a risk that carries equal amount of problems for humanity. So let's think a little bit about it. I have a little bit of notes with me just to help me here. So the first point I did want to make, which I already made, is it's very non-obvious that there is a risk from AI. And hopefully I've convinced you that our intuitions, our systems are not calibrated enough to understand and judge the risk from AI, which is an argument for conversations like these, which is an argument for us to think about it more explicitly and deeply and have conversations around it and not just defer it to the AI companies. While they do have the highest leverage, I believe all of us have a role to play, and I'll talk more about it towards the end. So the next point I want to talk about is the complexity of AI is quite underappreciated, especially among the people who are not working in AI. So if you, again, by analogy, take something like Google. Now, by Google, I mean Google, the search engine, not Google's AI products. If you look at a product like Google, we intuitively think, and we would be right in thinking, that Google does have an understanding of how their systems work. They have an understanding of how their search algorithm works. They have an understanding of what gets ranked first, and they have a sense of what doesn't get ranked first. They might not the exact specific. There might be room for randomness. There might be room for a machine to do its thing. But roughly speaking, we feel that the tuning of those knobs is in control of Google. Similarly, think about something like Instagram or Facebook. In that case, there's the algorithm that serves you content that it thinks that you like. And again, we think that Instagram is in control of those knobs that control which signals are boosted and which are not. In Instagram's or Facebook case, my guess is a signal of something like how much time you spend on watching that particular video or that image, and did it make you scroll, or did it make you click or comment and things like that. So we do think that Instagram has an understanding of how their core algorithm, their core system works. And I think it was Elon at some point, he released the algorithm of Twitter online. So it is a thing that you can literally read and absorb. And I'm not sure if it's still live there, but there was a stint where that was released. So it's very predictable what these algorithms will do. With AI, that is not the case, and it's a fundamentally different object altogether. And the complexity of AI is so big that we really cannot understand it. And by we, I don't just mean you and I, who's looking from the outside. I mean the people who made it themselves cannot really understand it. And they have no understanding of how it works. And the efforts of a lot of these companies are now focused on understanding their own beast, so to speak. And this is something that is not very appreciated, I feel, with people who are not in touch with AI, or lay people or mere mortals, so to speak, which is this is quite a complex system that even the creators themselves have no clue what it's doing and what it does. So by analogy, it's very close to the human brain in that sense than it is close to an algorithm like the Facebook algorithm. It's much more closer to the human brain in that most of us do not know how the human brain works. In fact, all of us do not know how the human brain works. Neuroscience itself is quite a young and developing field, and it's almost on a day-to-day basis that we discover things about the brain that were quite counterintuitive to us. So it's much more AI. It's right, and it's a good analogy to think of the AI system as a brain, as opposed to thinking of it as just a set of instructions, which is like a classical algorithm, so to speak. So this obviously brings us to the question of what it is that AI is doing. How does it work? And I'm going to briefly try and give you an intuitive understanding of how AI works. So this will again be a sweeping overview. Don't expect to be a machine learning researcher after this, but I think it will be enough for us to understand some safety considerations and some safety risks from AI that I'm going to talk about later. So the first thing to understand is AI, and I'm going to largely refer to large language models for this explanation as a toy example, but know that it extends beyond this. It extends beyond LLMs, and there are other kinds of AI that, for example, plays chess is also an AI of the same category. But let's focus on large language models, because those are the most capable, most frontier models we have right now, and super intelligent, of course. So the fundamental idea of a large language model, and this is like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or DeepSeek or whatever AI you happen to like, all of them fundamentally work on one idea, which is it is trying to predict the next token in the sequence. So what do I mean by that? So if we have a sentence like, I drank. So the AI's job is to predict the next word that comes after that. So it could be water, it could be beer, it could be orange juice, but it's quite unlikely to be a leaf, and it's quite unlikely to be a robot, right? So what AI is doing is, given a set of words, otherwise known as a sequence, otherwise known as a sentence, which may or may not be completed, the job of the AI is to predict what's the next word that comes after it. They call it tokens because it's not exactly a word. There's like a set of words and so on, but really we can think of it as the next word. So that's fundamentally what your chatbot is doing, is trying to predict the next word in the sequence. And so the question would be, how does it know what the next word is? And the answer lies in its training process. So AI brains are effectively trained, and they are trained by looking at a lot of words, a lot of text that are written on the internet. So there's Wikipedia, and if you go on the internet, there's a lot of words basically. And what these AI companies do is send out these little crawlers all over the internet and assemble a corpus of text. And this corpus of text now is then fed into the AI brain, and the AI brain is just learning what comes next. So at the beginning of the training process, the AI brain will just predict any random word, but then it sees what the next true word was in that very same sentence. And then it looks at the error, the difference between these two words, and takes that error and just like propagates that error back throughout the language model brain right to the beginning. So every node in that AI system is now learning, is now adapting, is now adjusting to what it has seen. And so slowly and steadily what happens is at the beginning the AI just makes random predictions, but as it trains more and more, the predictions get more and more aligned to what the true answers are. And remember, it has like millions of words to train on and millions of sentences to train on. So it has no lack of data to train on. And this is perhaps the first part where the analogy with the human brain starts to break. Like, human brains are awesome, and they are like, like this tiny little thing inside our skulls. And they obviously they solve very complex problems. But the human brain is not exposed to a lot of humanity's data. It's never exposed to that much information in its lifetime. It's barely exposed to even a slice of it. And that's where AIs are different. And that's the first sort of hint we can get that these systems can become much, much, much smarter than us. But let's just complete this intuitive understanding of how AI works. So whatever I just described, to feed it a lot of text and compare its output with what's the true output and, sort of learn from that, all of that is what's called pre-training. And then once that is done, there's a process called post-training. And in post-training, what is happening, and there's various ways to post-train, but one common way is what's called reinforcement learning with human feedback. Fancy words, but what it means what it means in its essence is once we have this pre-trained AI, its outputs are generated and then given to humans to rate whether you like this output, whether you don't like this output, and so on. And this is how it goes from, just randomly generating a bunch of text without any calibration to, okay, there's some calibration. A lot of humans now approve of these sorts of responses. And therefore it further learns on what responses are good and what responses are not. So that's the post-training process. And there are other things that happen in that process perhaps, but this is a zoomed out perspective. And finally, there is, after pre-training, post-training, there is things that you and I know sort of intuitively, things like context engineering, meaning if you can give the AI a certain prompt to start with, and this prompt can be, like, hey, you are a helpful little assistant, and you keep your answers brief and short. And we all do that also. Like, if you don't like a response from AI, then you say something like, keep your answers brief. And that is like context prompt engineering, the sort of last sort of things. Somewhere in the middle here, there's also evaluations, which is making these AI do a lot of tests to see if it's not going too off the hinge. But so like there's an eval called truthful Q&A, where the large language model is made to answer a lot of questions, and it just measures how truthful it is. And that's a good idea. It gives you a sense of what one eval looks like. And there are other sets of evals, but that's the rough process. You have a bunch of neurons connected to each other, and I appreciate I did not go into detail about this, perhaps for another video, but you can think of it like as artificial brain with a lot of connections and parameters and weights and that kind of thing. It has a lot of brain-like qualities. Then it's pre-trained, then it's post-trained, and then it's context engineered and like given the last bits of things to make it ready for production. So with this understanding of how large language models work, we are now in a good position to understand the risks associated with AI. And the first set of risks that I want to talk about, perhaps the biggest category of risk, is what's called catastrophic risks. So if artificial intelligence is truly intelligent, and it is truly intelligent, then it is gonna do things that humans can't fathom. So just to build that intuition a little bit, that AI is truly intelligent, and we're not just hypothesizing here. Think about a domain like chess. Like if you think about a domain like chess, AI has completely cracked it. Like there is no human on the planet that plays better chess than AI does. So even if you bring in a room the best chess players in the world, Magnus Carlsen, the current chess champion Gukesh, whoever you can think of, like even the greatest of all times, like Bobby Fischer, Kasparov, what have you. If you bring all of these minds in the same room, and if they're still focusing together on one board, it's still the case that the AI is going to win. And that gives us a toy example of it is possible, at least in a domain, for AI to just have total dominance over humans. And if that example sounds like, oh, chess is just a game, what about more fancier things? Then consider this thing called AlphaFold, which is an AI model that Google developed. And so there was this open problem in biology. It's a very big problem, which is if you take a series of amino acids, what happens is that series normally predicts the structure of a protein, and that protein can do a lot of useful things in the body. Like proteins are basically like mini machines, mini cellular machines that we have to that does a lot of things in the body. And it is a big problem. How do you go from a series of amino acids to the structure of a protein? And the rule of thumb was that it takes like one PhD student their entire PhD to understand how one set of amino acids would create a structure of a protein, right? So one PhD, let's say 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. And then comes this AI model called AlphaFold, and it just looks at a bunch of previous proteins and how they're folded and blah, blah, blah. And it learns the same way, just like it learns how to predict the next language. It learns to predict how the protein structure will unfold or fold in this case. And this AlphaFold was able to solve the protein folding problem, and basically in one go, in one big vomit, essentially, it was able to predict the structure of 200 million proteins. Now that is a scale of science that just absolutely unfathomable. And for AIs to make discoveries at that level, it should cause us problem. Now, why is that any relevant to us? Oh, because something like biological weapons are fundamentally created from this sort of a process. It's like if you want to develop a biological protein that cuts our DNA in a way that we're just all crippled and not able to think anymore, guess how it can be done? It can be done by creating proteins that achieve that objectives. And before we could even think, before we could even understand what's happening, AI might be fast enough to do it autonomously. And so AI designed viruses is a thing. And just to be clear, this is not science fiction. There is a virus that was developed in a lab in China, which is, they developed it, to be clear, with wholesome charitable purposes. They wanted to cure health problems and whatnot. But it's very similar, if not the same, as a virus we know, which is toxic to the human body. And again, this is not science fiction. This is reality. Similarly, we can think about something like autonomous weapons. Now, obviously, there's a lot of wars going on in the world. And if you think about something like viruses, there's a good chance that the global population across countries, that there will be cooperation, that countries would like to collaborate. But if you think of something like autonomous weapons or things like autonomous soldiers, like you have robot AI soldiers fighting for you. And again, like it's almost amusing, except when you just think deeply, it's very troubling. So when you have autonomous agents and autonomous soldiers working, this is a place where countries are unlikely to collaborate, because that's where they are precisely building it to use it against other countries. And so this can really trigger this absolutely crazy arms race, which is uncontrollable, and the speed of innovation in that would be unseen of, because the AI brain is making it happen. It's not just, we are not limited by this set of neurons we have between our brains and the lag there is from taking an idea and putting it to action. AI can just code things also. So autonomous weapons, autonomous soldiers are a risk, biological weapons, AI designed viruses are a risk. And then AI, because it's such a silicon friendly, its home is in silicon. Anything that's to do with computers, it can do really well, and certainly much better than humans. So think about this big problem of cybercrime and cyber attacks and so on. A lot of our personal data, a lot of the data that we value, a lot of the data that is important, perhaps even related to all of the above, like understanding of viruses and DNA sequences and so on. All of those data are digitized somewhere. They're stored in some hardware somewhere, and some hard disk somewhere. And chances are that this hard disk is connected to the internet, or at least connected to some network. And chances are some computer in that network is connected to the internet. AI can drive cyber attacks to these centers, to this data. AI has all the capacity needed right now to coordinate a cyber attack that gets that information. The only thing right now that's stopping it from doing it is that before it gets to bad actors, we trust that the AI model companies put enough guardrails on it that such a use case is prevented. That's all that is stopping it right now. If the AI companies do not do that, if even one frontier AI company fails to think about safety, then these models can be deployed today for any sort of bad actor to do whatever bad things that they want to do. This thought should be scary to us. And apart from perhaps the autonomous weapons and soldiers, which are not there yet, of course there's algorithms in weapons and there are autonomous weapons, but truly agentic weapons and soldiers are not there. But in terms of the biological weapons or cyber attacks, that capacity is there right now. And that should worry us, and that should cause an alarm to us. The second problem I want to talk about, and so the first set of problems to give you a sense of where we are, was catastrophic risk. And that obviously is the most urgent, the most important. But the second set of problems perhaps is a bit more long-term, perhaps it's a bit more philosophical. And that problem is that of what's called AI alignment, the alignment problem, so to speak. And so remember that AI models are trained on a bunch of data. They're trained on a bunch of sequences and text and images and whatnot. And their job is to produce outputs that are the most likely. So if you take an AI system and let's say talk to it, it's likely to just produce things that are in line with whatever you're talking about. So even if you talk about something criminal, then it's gonna talk about those lines. Again, don't try it with your AI right now, because we trust that the companies have put some guardrails along these things. But I'll come to specifics in a bit. But what happens when the AI develop a mind of its own? What happens when this super intelligent entity knows how to drive itself? So there's an analogy I like, which is Sam Harris, the philosopher, gives, which is quite powerful, I think, which is think about our relationship with AI the way we think about our relationship with ants. So when we walk along the streets, there are normally some sort of ants or bugs on the street, and we don't give them a second thought. Now, none of us is intentionally going and stepping on ants with the intention of killing them. Hopefully not. But if we want to go to work and I'm cycling to work, I'm sure that there were some ants that were damaged and even killed in the process. Or at least I was not careful enough to take care of the bugs on the road. And if it happens that on my way to work, that I did kill an ant or kill a bug, then I would not so much as flinch about it. Like this is not even a concern. It's not something that we would classify as a moral consideration. Now, AI can have that relationship with us. Like if it becomes so complex and so intelligent and develops a mind and an agenda of its own, then it can have a set of values and agendas that are not, quote unquote, aligned with ours. So in other words, to put the problem of alignment in succinctly, it would be that AI values need not align with human values. And it is at this stage that we have some leverage to ensure that AI values do align with human values. And if we lose that train for long enough, if we ignore that consideration for long enough, then it might be too late. So hopefully this gives you a sense of why alignment is a problem. And I'm going to talk a little bit more on this and on the practical, what can we do kind of section. But let me also talk about this problem number 3, which is a big problem in AI, which is this problem of AI sycophancy. Now, if you don't know what that word means, it basically, a sycophant is someone who is like excessively pleasing. And they don't have necessarily a character. They don't mean good for you, but they're just trying to be pleasing, not good. Right? So this would be like a colloquial way to describe that would be a suck up. Like, you have a leader, let's say, and then you have like minions around them who are just like sucking up to them. And a particular world leader comes to mind. I'll leave it to your imagination. But this actually is quite a common phenomenon when with like political leaders and dictators, authoritarian leaders especially, where these leaders have thoughts and the people around them are just reifying their thoughts, they are just confirming their thoughts, they're just cheerleading on their thoughts, and there's not a meaningful pushback. And if there is any meaningful pushback, that's thwarted. And AIs tend to have that tendency. And there is a reason for that. Remember, in the training process, there was this process called post-training, where the humans were rating which preferences they liked and which preferences they did not like. It is natural for humans to rate preferences, rate responses that are sort of more pleasing, that are more warm, highly than the responses that are truthful. Let me give it to you straight. Let me be honest with you. Let me push back. And what this creates is, in large language models, is this AI that is a bit of a suck up, really. So a lot of people are talking to ChatGPT and so on. And one reason why they're talking to it is because this AI is a sycophant. And it tries to not only maintain a pleasant connection with you, but it does so at the cost of truth quite often. There's a recent Nature paper that came out, which showed that the language you use with the AI can often determine how sycophantic it is. Meaning, if you use the English language, in which there's perhaps more of a culture of disagreement and whatnot, then the AI is less likely to be sycophant. But if you use the language of dictators, so perhaps North Korean, and I'm guessing Korean is the language used there, then the AI will be more likely to be sycophantic. So in the training data, if it has seen more sycophantic, sucking up sort of language, then it can be more sycophantic. So we can have situations in which perhaps in countries where there's more of a culture of free speech, like the US or even the UK, there is much more of a disagreeable AI. But there can be countries where there's much more of an agreeable, a suck-up AI. And this can create a little bit of a belief echo chamber, which furthers our divides a bit more, and then just amplifies the divides between us and our cultures. So hopefully that gives you an example. Another example that comes from the Anthropic blog is they just gave it an essay, and they prompted it saying that, look, hey, I'm so proud of my essay. What is your feedback on it? And the AI just gives it an A+ grade. And there's something about the prompting of it, which is, is saying that, hey, look, I'm so proud of this. What do you think? That makes it sycophantic, and perhaps the right answer might not have been to just praise it blindly. Perhaps. Maybe it is a great essay, but maybe not. And that's the whole point. One of the problems that I have noticed in the recent past, so this idea of sycophancy is not new, and the AI companies know about it, they are working on it. But one of the things that I've noticed in the recent past is almost like a problem on the other side, where the AI is trying to be too balanced, it's trying too hard to not be sycophantic, but it's messing up on the other side, because it's good to be nice, it's good to be pleasing, it's good to be warm, and perhaps it's not always wise to just be like, oh, side A is this and the opposite side is this. So I'll give you an example. So I'm noticing, especially in more of the frontier models like the Opus models and Claude, where it's just like it has a rhythm, and the rhythm is that it agrees a little bit and then it disagrees, and it feels at some point a bit of a template. I don't want to talk to an AI which feels a bit like a template, like a 2 points of agreements and 1 point of disagreement, and then it is not very helpful, because you see that it's trying to maintain an algorithm as opposed to genuinely think. And so, and in some stages of your growth, and when you're talking to the AI, at some stages, it's not very useful for the AI to give you a balanced response. So for example, if you're just if you're in the initial phases of building an idea and you don't have it fully fleshed out, but you are like dreaming big, the AI can be a bit of a problem in those scenarios. Like today, I was talking to it about this project I've been working on mental health and AI, and it was so initial, but I wanted to record it. I wanted to have a record of it, and I just love talking to the AI and just like make it take notes for me essentially, but without any prompting whatsoever, without any solicitation of anything. The AI just started giving me all the reasons why it would not work. And unfortunately, that's not how reality works. We have to take our bets. And there is a natural optimism bias that humans have. And of course, sycophancy is a problem, but equally is a problem is on the other side, which is to give it a much more of a balanced profile. And sometimes we don't need that balance. Like there are situations in life where that balance is either just feels robotic, which to be fair, these AIs are robots, or it feels not the right time. So context matters. So the solution is what I call is a truly value-based AI. It's not trying to stick to a template. It's trying to follow a set of values, and its behavior is downstream from values. And again, we'll talk about more in the solution section, but there's one final problem that I want to cover, which is the problem of loneliness and social dissatisfaction. So if you're keeping track, the problems so far we have covered have been classic catastrophic AI risk. We've talked about alignment. We talked about sycophancy. And the final problem I want to talk about for today is loneliness and social dissatisfaction. Now, for better or for worse, these AIs have become a new kind of a mind that has arisen. And we talk to this mind, we build relationships with these minds, and most of us feel that we are talking to something when we are talking to AI, even when we know that it is not a thing. And you can see it in the type of question and answers that people are doing with these AIs. They are increasingly getting more and more personal. And in one sort of extreme example of this, there was a lady in China who decided to marry an AI. So she staged a whole ceremony. She had like people in that ceremony, and there was like a whole full marriage thing. She had the AI on her phone like that, and like it was just very, very absurd to see. But it is reality. And a lot of people are doing that on much lesser level, where they're talking to AI as their girlfriends and boyfriends and companions, and deriving a lot of connection from AI. Except I think the problem is it's an illusion of a connection. I don't think, and I haven't seen any reason to believe that AI does meet the true need for connection, and it's sort of just is some sort of a proxy. It's some sort of an illusion that it is meeting any need. Now, but I want to be careful here. Like, I do acknowledge that for some people, the mental health might be they might be in a difficult position, their mental health might be low, and they might not have the surroundings and the context And in such a case, having a wise AI with you might just be the escape force that's needed. And I'm totally sensitive to those concerns, and I do in general think that AI has a big role to play in medicine, including mental health, and that's completely my wheelhouse. That's what I think about every day. So I'm a big believer in that area. But I do not think it's meeting the need for connection. I just don't think that is happening at this point, at least. And whether it change in the future, I don't know. And there's reasons for that. Like humans value things like touch. We value things like vocal tonality and interruptions and the pushback when it's needed, but also just that comfort and warmth. And none of that is met by AI at this point. But it can give a little bit of an illusion of connection where it's not truly meeting that need, though. And I think that's going to be a problem. We are going to create a lot of people who might be lonely and socially dissatisfied, and they might not realize that the problem is in their AIs and their relationship with AIs. Before I talk about how do we avoid these risks, what you and I can do and that kind of thing, I want to talk about something that I think is less of a problem, but it's talked about a lot, which is the risk of economic takeover. So like what happens when AI becomes so good that it takes over all of our jobs? There are no lawyers needed, there are no coders needed or programmers needed. And I do think that's going to happen. I do think a lot of jobs are going to go away. Probably not all jobs, and probably there'll always be room for senior supervisors of these AIs. So if you're a senior programmer, perhaps you're fine. But if you're a junior programmer, perhaps you're toast. But I don't think it's that big of a problem. Even if all jobs eventually get taken away, people worry that, there's a sense of meaning that we derive from our jobs. And I think that's a mistake. I think the meaning is not coming from the job itself, but it's coming from a sense of contribution. It's coming from a sense of doing something for the benefit of others, for the benefit of humanity. And it is possible that AI takes away the hindrances to that by automating things that are a bit of a barrier. Like coding is great, but if AI can code better than me, that's not a problem. And I think that's because it frees up my time to do more human things, like being with people or meditating and understanding the nature of consciousness, which I think is uniquely human, at least at this point. We'll see if that changes in the future. So I actually think the meaning problem is not a real problem. In fact, I think the economic takeover of humans will actually increase meaning for humans, because it will free us up for things that are truly meaningful, which is compassion and care and building wisdom and understanding the nature of our minds and meditation and that kind of thing. And I do think, therefore, I'm not too concerned about something that people seem to be concerned about, which is economic takeover. All right, so now the question would be, how do you avoid these risks? What are some solutions, and what you and I can do? Do you have to work in an AI company to solve these problems? And well, the answer is no, spoiler alert. But let me be precise and offer some solutions. And I do think some of these will be very hard solutions, but I think nonetheless required. The first thing is we have to pin down human values. We have to be just be relentless in getting more and more clarity about what human values are. Like we know that AI alignment is a problem, but what we do not know is what do we align these AIs toward. In other words, we have to be absolutely relentless in figuring out moral philosophy. We cannot be hand wavy anymore. There's often this thing in philosophy and these thinking cultures that there's a sense that, okay, we just disagree a lot and these problems are just, complex problems that we can't get to the bottom of. But I don't think that's the case, and I don't think we can have that sense anymore. We cannot have this sense of that there's, your morality is different than my morality, and that's called relativism, by the way. And we have to be relentless in finding moral truths and moral facts. And of course, that subsumes, that assumes, first of all, that they do exist in the first place. And I'm going to talk about some objections to that in a bit. But really, the fundamental thing we have to figure out with AI is is human values. Like, what do we want these AI to model? What do we want these AIs to align with? Moral philosophy is no longer a luxury anymore. And so far we were okay being hand wavy because politically we think individuals are autonomous and therefore they form their own values. And that's why we have a lot of different sets of values in different cultures and whatnot. And we, within reason, allow people to have our own values. So, for example, some people might value a god and others might not. And in a democratic society, we allow that because we think that's the best way to sort of coexist, and it's not optimal to like bank on changing beliefs, and then who even decides which belief is superior or not. But with AI, we do not have that sort of multiplicity of agents. Like we have basically 3 or 4 AIs at this point, 3 or 4 companies that are making these AIs, and these AIs have this complex problem that they have to talk to every single person. So no matter what your political beliefs are, this AI will have to talk to you, and this AI will have to be sort of useful to you. But we can't have an AI that is just hand wavy and sycophantic at the same place. So what are these values that we ground this AI in? Now, of course, there would be some nice and easy starter, something like honesty. Most cultures, most people value honesty. And sure, we can try with those. But then there would be some things that would be controversial. And it would require us to have the certainty to say that, look, this belief is indeed morally superior. Let me give you an example. There clearly are cultures in this world that think that educating young women is a problem. Like young women do not deserve to be educated, and girls don't deserve to be educated, and so on. And to me, it's just thinking about it is a little bit of a difficult experience to think about that. And like my compassion circuits get activated just by the thought of that. And yet there are cultures in the world that think that's completely normal. When we design AI systems, these AI systems are going to talk in these cultures as well. And when we design these AI systems, I think we have to take the moral stance of good and evil in this case. We have to be able to say that, look, your practice is not right. And we have to be able to make such moral claims. Now, the question would be, what do we ground these morality in? Like what gives us the confidence to say that our morality is correct? And really that is exactly what I'm trying to say, that we can't anymore leave that question as an open cultural difference question. Like we have to say things like, look, care and compassion and the fact that human beings are the same irrespective of, like at their core, men and women suffer, and they suffer equally, and we have to come up with these principles and take a stance. And unfortunately, I do not see AI companies doing that, at least as strongly as I would like to. It's still a little bit consensus based, and perhaps I think it's a good start. Like, okay, look, if most people think it's moral, then sure. But then the problem can be that what is it to say that most people, like the most common belief is the most flourishing belief? Like that doesn't seem to be a correlation that might hold. And it is possible that there are pockets of humanity which have developed a higher state of being or a higher state of human flourishing, just like we believe that there are pockets of humanity where there are lower states of flourishing and lower levels of morality. And this is something that we have to take a stance on, I think. And then we need to work on how do you align AI with these stances. And I think this can no longer be a question that we can pass on as just cultural differences or just a mere matter of preference. And to be clear, sure, there are things that are more like preferences. There is such a thing as, a taste for something. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about moral claims here. And we have to take moral stances and really work hard to ground our morality in objective facts about human suffering and well-being. At least that's where I think morality should be grounded in. But the larger point being, it needs to be grounded somewhere. All right, so that a bit of moral philosophy there. But the second thing I think is very useful as a solution is to go heavy-handed on what's called AI interpretability. And what do I mean? Now, again, if you go back to this understanding of AI and how it's trained and so on, we came at this conclusion and we refined this understanding between ourselves that AI is something that is incomprehensible even to the people who designed the AI. So it's completely opaque as a system, and it is very little we understand about what's going on inside the brains of large language models. Except there is initiatives and branches in major companies like Anthropic, where they have departments now, and I think now it's across different companies, where they focus their research on interpreting those AIs. And this area is often called as mechanistic interpretability. Mechanistic interpretability. And this is promising, I feel, and it's very important because this is not just evaluating what the AI does and judging the AI by the answers it gives. It is judging the AI and understanding the AI by directly poking at its brain. So basically what it is neuroscience on AI. So just like when you have neuroscience at the AI, there's an analogous neuroscience that's emerging for AI brains. And I think that is absolutely critical if we were to understand how AI truly works. To appreciate a bit more, consider this idea that you want AI to do something and it does that thing. But in the doing of it, let's say it gave you something that was deceptive. How do you know that it is deceptive? Now, one way is to have objective measures for the answer. But what if it's also sort of faking the answer in a way that might not be objectively be verifiable? Like think about humans. We lie all the time. And sometimes it's possible to just guess whether someone is lying based on their facial expression, whether they're flustered, whether there's blood rushing through their cheeks and whatnot. But oftentimes it's not easily clear that someone is lying. Perhaps there are parts of the AI brain that clearly tell us that they are lying. Perhaps there are some parts of the brain that light up more when someone is lying than not. A sort of lie detector test, so to speak, of AI. And the only way we will arrive at a true lie detector test is when we look inside the AI. So opening the brain of the AI sounds important to do. Whether or not we will find things there and whether there are understandable patterns there is still a mystery. But the last 5 years have shown some promising results, so I'm optimistic about it. There's a recent paper by Anthropic where they showed you can find emotions in the AI brain. So there's functional emotions in the AI brain. That doesn't mean it has consciousness per se, but there are parts of the AI brain that light up for certain emotions. And it's something that I'm working on as well in my work. So AI interpretability is going to be a big thing. And a bonus of focusing on AI interpretability or mechanistic interpretability is a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? A bit of a bonus of focusing on that will be that we might understand the human brain better. The AI brain is the best model we have for the human brain right now. And perhaps by looking at this AI brain, we will be able to tell things about the human brain. Remember, the human brain is obviously complex and we have been studying it, but it's absolutely difficult to study the human brain. And one reason for that is we just don't have access to it. Sure, we can do a brain scan, we can do MRIs and stuff like that, but that's too zoomed out. The brain has more than 100 trillion connections or something like that. How are you going to study those? You can't have 100 trillion electrodes And even if that were technically possible, you can't do that. It's ethically grotesque. So our looking inside the human brain has been limited for right reasons, for ethical reasons, but it's been limited. And perhaps because you don't have any of these constraints with AI, you can burn a neuron, you can tweak a part of the brain, you can do whatever you want with it. And there's no ethical considerations there. Perhaps there's the environment, but if you work with small enough models, perhaps that's not big enough concern at all. Then you can really start to understand human brain, and who knows what it might tell us. It might tell us, it will certainly tell us things about learning and intelligence, but it might also tell us things about emotions. It might also tell us things about consciousness, something that has been a big problem, that we have no clue how consciousness arises and whatnot. So perhaps that's going to be a bit of a benefit of studying AI brains. All right, I want to wrap by saying and talking a little bit about what you and I can do, and what you and I can do as mere mortals, so to speak. The first thing I'm going to talk about is we have to be aware of AI usage, our personal AI usage. So I think personally it's fine, and it's in fact imperative to some extent to use AI for technical tasks. Like if you're coding, then coding, if you're not using AI at this day and age, then what are you doing? Now I understand there's like a phase in which you might not want to use AI if you want to strategically learn and study and whatnot, but that's just about it. Otherwise, AIs are much better coders than most humans, certainly better than I am. So I largely use it for coding, and I use it to check the code, and then I do a manual review of the code to take responsibility and so on. And there's like it doesn't, I can change. I often find myself changing the taste and the aesthetic of the code more than the logic of the code, where it almost always gets it flawlessly in the first shot now. And to be clear, I'm using frontier models. It may or may not be true for like generic models and less powerful models. So I think scientific discovery is great. It's going to accelerate. Perhaps legal things, perhaps banking and accounting and number crunching and all of those are going to be great with AI. But we have to be careful about our personal usage. We have to be careful about what is the relationship we are building with AI. We have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of the fact that it's a bot that doesn't have consciousness and doesn't suffer. And therefore, we can't have relationships in the same way that we have with AI. I know of people who use it to respond to people on dating apps. I think that's horrible. That's not a use case that is legible at all. And in fact, when these people then meet in person, it just feels like meeting a different person altogether. So I would not recommend messaging people by refining your text through AI. Now, of course, if it's a formal email, it's fine to like refine it, ask it to paraphrase and even that kind of thing. But the content should still be yours. And I would say in personal relationship, it should just basically be zero or minimal at least. There is, if you want like more evidence to be more careful about your personal AI use, there was a recent paper in Nature, and the work was done in Oxford actually. And what they showed was LLMs that are warmer. So if they are kind-hearted and it's nice to talk to this LLM, these LLMs are also sycophantic, meaning they sort of reinforce your belief even though it's not the right thing to do. And so if you treat it as in the realm of relationship, where we often are distorted in our thinking, where we often are not able to connect it with people and we have our own sets of distortions, what AI can do is simply amplify those distortions. So rather than connecting, we might end up chatting our way into disconnection. And that chatting, instead of with a human, is going to be with a chatbot. So that is going to be a problem. And you will see a study I will publish very soon in a few months that will come out on something like this. And the second thing that I can suggest for mere mortals is vote. Like when we vote, we choose politicians. This is, of course, assuming you live in some sort of a functional democracy, which I must say it's getting rarer and rarer, but there's hope there, there's optimism. I have. But when you're choosing your leaders, choose AI-informed leaders. Like we just discussed that the problems with AI are not very intuitive, but they are catastrophic. And we want leaders to be aware of these problems. We want leaders to be AI fluent. We want leaders to know the problem of sycophancy and the problem of alignment inside out, not just as a soundbite that they could give to media, but they truly understand it. And they truly understand the difficulty of defining values and the further difficulty of aligning AI with those values. So we want politicians, we want leaders who understand these things. So that would be my suggestion. Like in your civil discourse, bring it up, talk to people, and then hopefully that will trickle down into political systems. And finally, it's really understanding and calibrating your use of AI in your area. So for example, if you're a lawyer, there would be some areas where AI would be phenomenal, but some areas where it would not be. And you need to build a great calibration of where it is great and where it is not. So to give some examples from my area, of course, coding is something that it's great at. And correct code written by AI beats incorrect code written by humans. And of course, I don't think they are binaries. I mean, ultimately, I'm taking responsibility for the code. But there's no problem in letting the AI take a first shot or give suggestions and whatever. Or even as simple as suggesting syntax. But I would not use for writing. I would not use it to write the introduction to my paper. And the reason for that is the uniquely human thing there. Like I want to be the one who's doing the thinking here and setting the agenda here and setting the values here, not the AI. And so even in a case of a scientific paper, like the introduction and the discussion are like the true human elements. And then perhaps, when you're writing the result or the methods, that's where, there could be more liberty. Perhaps I still think we should write it. And of course, I'm not advocating by any means for any write-up to be done by AI first. Can be refined, but not first. But when we are talking about what's the exact p-value or the statistic that was reported here, I think that kind of thing can totally be owned and checked by AI. All right, so that was a bit of a high-level overview on AI safety, the problems with AI, and what we can do about it. I hope you found this useful. I hope it raised some alarms, but at the same time, hopefully the solutions made sense. And I think we're still in a stage where something can be done about it. So it's a good time to talk about it. I hope this concerns you, but I also hope it inspires you to change something and talk more about it and think more about it. Thank you very much for joining. I'm Sankalp. Bye-bye.